This is Jack Greiner, and along with Randy Freking, we're pleased to welcome Sridhar Pappu this morning to the We Love Our Team podcast. Sridhar's a lifelong Reds fan. He grew up in Oxford, Ohio. He's a prolific writer who has worked at Sports Illustrated, The Washington Post, and The New York Times, including other stops. And he wrote a fantastic book called The Year of the Pitcher, which was published in 2017. It covers extensively the 1968 Major League season with an emphasis on Bob Gibson and Denny McLain. So welcome, Sridhar. We're honored to have you here on our podcast. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
All right. All right. There's our studio audience making noise for us. But what we really want to talk about today, Sridhar, is your Reds fandom. So we'd like to go back to the beginning. How was that fandom first achieved?
So I'd like to say it's lifelong, but it's not really. So, like most people, like when you're a little kid, especially, so I was born in 75, so I missed the machine and so I paid attention to sort of the wreckage of the machine. And I think that like when I was 8, my sister took me to a game and famously like Johnny Bench was playing third base and they had already traded Tom Seaver. But really my years were with Eric. And so when Dave Parker signed in 84, my baseball years were really sort of coming into their own in 84, 85, 86, and then 87 was my team. So and strangely, like, my interest in baseball was really spurred by the Mets and Dwight Gooden.
Oh, okay.
But I was really falling in love with baseball through, Eric and, his guys like Cal Daniels and Barry Larkin and not necessarily Lenny Harris, but like that young bumper crop. So 86.
And by 1987, all those players were assembled. Is that why you said 87 was your team?
Yeah, and it was just like it was perfect age for me. And that was Eric's year, like where he should have won the MVP. And it was also like they had those veterans like Buddy Bell and Bo Diaz that were older, and Parker still had a great year that year, but like tremendous year. But Eric had one of the best seasons in baseball history before he got hurt, and then Cal had a great year and seemed like he was coming on the rise. And but Paul O'Neill was there, and Barry Larkin, and so for me, I was listening to Mo Egger on the Bengals Athletic podcast, and he was talking about favorite Reds team versus, and his team was like 1995, and people say, why isn't your favorite team 1990? And he gave a reason. So like my favorite team is 87 because that's the team that sort of crystallized for me, even though they fell in second place. And so so those provided the best memories for me, and that was the team that I went to, I think, the most games up until that point. I was there the day that Eric hit the walk-off against the Giants in extras to reach the 30-30 club. And then you're hooked, right?
Yep.
And watching that team, the string of second place finishes, going through 89 and the scandals and like how hurt they were. And then winning in 1990, so then you're there. So, yeah.
There's something about being a 12-year-old. I don't know. It's funny because I was 12 in 1970.
Yeah.
And that's when it kind of crystallized for me. I mean, I still on my desk have a plastic ruler with the 1970 Reds roster pictures on it. So
yeah,
that is, I think, that's when it kind of crystallized. And it sounds like in 87, you were 12 years old. And so it really kind of hit for you as well.
I mean, you're old enough to understand the game. You're old enough to sort of understand the nuances. Um, you sort of get it, right? In a way that, and it's that age, right, where like you don't have enough going on, right? Like like other things are about to take over your life, and it's like that sweet spot of
Exactly.
um, and so this is going to be the thing you're going to pay attention to, um, and also for my generation in the 80s, and it was when we were chasing cards, and that 87 top set for my generation, which is the wood bordered set across the spectrum, that's our that's our set. So
Yeah,
that's the summer I actually was paying the most attention to baseball because I was opening packs every other week. So
exactly. Now it's funny, and then and I remember back in 1999, uh, going a game where the Reds were playing. It might have been an interleague game. It doesn't matter, but it was on TV, and they fell behind right in the first inning by like 5 runs, and I got mad, and I went out and started cutting the grass. And my son Joe, who was 12 that year, came running out because the Reds tied the game, like with a big inning, and he just wanted to let me know as I was cutting the grass, and it hit me. It was like, wow, he's 12 this year, and he's going through the same sorts of things that I went through back in 1970. I could have seen myself doing exactly what Joe did,
yeah,
uh, except my dad made me cut the grass when I was 12. So
yeah,
that was it.
Hey, Schroeder, Jack mentioned your book
yeah.
about the year of the pitcher, and I wonder if there's any interesting Reds tidbits in your book.
So there are a couple. Um, there's a few actually. Um, one involves Jim Maloney. There's a whole because there's exploration about pitchers. It sort of delves into the notion of what they went through that period, and it actually sort of talks about Maloney and the issue. And I don't know whether he and I went in depth into it, or whether it came across through my own reporting, but sort of what the depths of his pain by the late '60s, and kind of what Dave Bristol did to him. Um, he was not in good shape by 67, 68. And there's a famous sport magazine article. By the way, this is one of my big, I have a number of sort of, not causes, but things I'm passionate about. But one of them is getting the sport magazine digitized because, Sports Illustrated really did not come into its own until the late '70s or mid '70s, I think. But Sport Magazine was great. And this article by Pat Jordan, the great writer profile, just talked about the agony that Jim Maloney was going through and that what Dave Bristol was putting him through. And he's taking cortisone, the very thing that destroyed Danny McClain's career, and whether it contributed to him or not. But there is a chapter that talks about, what pitchers were doing. And, cortisone was the undoing of Denny's career. And in that same chapter, Sam McDowell talks about taking anything he can. I mean, obviously he had his own demons, but um,
They
uh,
just kept running him out there, huh? Despite all of his pain, they didn't have Tommy John surgery back in those days.
no. And in fact, Bristol said, you're pitching hurt. And then the second one, but in that same notion, Maloney talks about he's from California, and he really wanted the first time he met Frank Robinson was in spring training, but not on the field. So they said, "Oh, Frank will be at the dog track tonight." He's like, "Oh, okay." So he goes, "Where is he?" And he goes, "Oh, he's with where the black players are." And he had to go to the black section of the dog track, and he talked to Frank Robinson over a chain link fence. It's just like that's a
Wow.
heartbreaking scene.
Yeah, that's just
Um, it's awful. And then And then,
But Maloney, I looked just because I was thinking about this for the podcast, and I think it was in '66, but I think he threw like 255 innings
yeah,
that year. It's just mind boggling, that what, like you say, and what was going through. And I'm going to try to find that Post article, because was Pat Jordan a pitcher? Was he a guy that?
yeah, he was. He wrote A False Spring, which is his memoir, and then he wrote, and then there's a collection of essays about pitching that
Yeah,
he did. But yeah, he was a minor league pitcher.
yeah, and
How
I
about
mean,
Milt? How about Milt Pappas? Isn't there some story about Milt Pappas
Yeah,
from
so,
'68?
well, there's a chapter called Out There, and it revolves around the Kennedy assassination that year, in which, and it's a pivotal point for the players' union. Not the the assassination is another part, but the funeral plays a big role in the galvanization of the players' union because it's a mess. Um, because some teams had decided not to play on the day of mourning, and some team or until the day or until the body, which had been transported by train to Washington. And the Reds and Cardinals were supposed to play a doubleheader on that Sunday, and they both voted unanimously that they're not playing on the day of mourning. But the Reds are, and this is Crosley Field, and the Reds management said, no, you're playing. And the compromise was actually made. It's like, okay, we're not going to play until after the funeral train reaches Washington. If you remember, the train is late, and it goes from afternoon to evening, and the Reds and Cardinals are still not going to play. And so, but as the hours go on, and Tim McCarver and Milt Pappas are going back and forth, it's like, okay, the deal is we're not playing, right? But Reds management, especially Bristol, essentially cajoles the players into saying, convincing them, and kind of threatens them into, taking the field or getting 9 guys. I mean, at one point Maloney was going to play penciled into right field, and then and then and Pappas family says, like, if you go out there, there's like kind of no going back. And then finally they both sort of they play, but I'm talking to Marvin Miller about what happened that weekend, because some teams like the Mets refused to play in San Francisco, and all these different kinds of things happened. But that weekend really was a galvanizing force for the players movement, because the way the owners treated it, like nobody wanted to play. They shouldn't have played that weekend. They shouldn't have been an organizing thing, and the owners just shoehorned it in. It was really just a defining moment. And I obviously the trade that happened, and then Milt Pappas was traded a few days later to Atlanta, mainly I think because of this. But obviously the trade for Frank Robinson was terrible. But I kind of view Milt Pappas as kind of a hero, in the players'
Yeah.
movement, because of what he did and what he stood for. And
So Pappas was the player representative for the
he
union,
was,
and
yeah,
McCarver was the Cardinals player
yeah,
rep.
yeah.
Interesting.
And they were willing to stand, and the players were willing to stand their ground. Even Roger Maris, I mean, not even Roger Maris is like, the owners are being so greedy here.
Yeah. Marvin Miller, it's interesting. I don't want to get off too much on a tangent, but it is so sad to me that he was posthumously inducted into the Hall of Fame. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just I think it's one of the big tragedies of baseball, because the guy, nobody had as big an impact. I one time said, I think if I were to list the most impactful people in Major League Baseball history, I think I would put Jackie Robinson first, and maybe Branch Rickey second, for what they did to integrate the game. But I think Marvin Miller is third. He's clearly in the top five. I mean,
and then they did it because the family was like, "We don't want it," and they did it. Right? It was almost like they stuck it to him.
yeah, yeah. And he, where he attended college, Randy? Do you know where Marvin Miller was a student?
Um, I do not, Jack. I'm wondering if it was the University of Dayton, but I somehow think that's wrong.
It was Miami University.
Well, he started in Miami, and then I think he left, I don't know where he graduated, but he started in Miami.
Yeah. So there you go. We're breaking trivia. That would have been no, it's just interesting. And I'll tell you the other. And again, I don't want to get off on a Marvin Miller tangent, but I always found it interesting that one of the wasn't Richard was Nixon was Nixon offered that job, or wasn't there some talk of Richard Nixon? I think
Jack, I've done a lot of research on Marvin Miller. Actually, I've never come across that.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I think what it was Bunning threw his name out there because Bunning was actually pretty active in the Players Association.
But Bunning really wanted Marvin Miller, like he really wanted him. So
good call.
Nixon wasn't looking for a job until like 1975, and Marvin was hired, I think, in the late 60s.
He was. You talked about the Milt Pappas trade. Is sort of that seems to be the trade. And we've talked. Randy and I've talked about it, but I think when you ask people if there's a almost guaranteed answer to a question, it's when you ask a Reds fan to name the worst trade in Reds history. And I think the Frank Robinson, Milt Pappas trade, and there were some other people involved in the trade, but that seems to be the one. But I'm wondering, Sridhar, if as a Reds fan, if you can think of any trades that stand out in your mind, either good trades, bad trades, trades you wish they would have made,
So the trade that this is going to sound silly, and I joke about this. I like to call this the trade where my childhood died. Is when they sent Cal Daniels and Lenny Harris to the Dodgers.
Sridhar, I have to admit, I don't recall that trade.
Because, you think a team is going to stay together forever. And it was 1989. This is a terrible season. And, that team ended up, because of that trade, they got Mario Duncan and Tim Leary, and Tim Leary becomes Hal Morris, two cornerstones of the World Series. But I just remember I got really upset, because you think these guys are going to be together and win together, and they're not. And I just remember just being super, super upset. And that was the trade for me. Where it's just I mean, even more so than when they traded Eric, but it was because the team that I loved was not going to win the World Series, right? The team from 87 was not going to, in 88, was not going to win the World Series together. So that was the first trade that really sort of stuck with me.
And those were competitive teams. I think they finished in second place 4 straight years.
Yeah.
Late 80s.
Yeah. And so, but when I say that was the trade where it's oh, and I just remember, Johnny Bench afterwards, on a broadcast, just saying, well, now it's Orlando Rooms' time. And I was just what is happening with the world? What is
There's
going
a name for the past, Jack. Orlando Rooms.
Rolando.
Rolando
Rooms.
What is going on? So
there's an interview with Pete when he was still managing, and he was talking about the players that he had, and he was, and I wish I could remember, but I just remember it was one of those things where guys do this, and it drives me crazy, where they say, well, you've got your Krenchickis and you've got your O'Neills. And then he goes, you've got your Roomses. He had to make rooms plural, and it just cracked me up. Well, this is, so That's funny, Schroeder, because I had a very similar reaction when the Reds traded Lee May, Tommy Helms, and Jimmy Stewart for some guy named Joe Morgan and some other guys from Houston. And,
Cesar Geronimo and Jack Bellingham and
and Ed Armbrister, so
Yeah.
who are Dennis Menke, who are these guys? But my dad assured me that it was a good deal, but it was, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like the day your innocence dies to a certain extent. It's like, well, wait a minute. What do you mean Lee May's not going to be the Big Bopper's not going to be on the Reds anymore? How can this possibly be? And it is separate apart from the merits of the trade. There was that kind of emotional attachment that you grow to have with these guys. But it's funny, that you kind of run the string out on the trade. Going back to the Pappas trade, even. Okay, so the Reds gave up Frank Robinson for Milt Pappas. That was a shame. But they seem to do okay without Robinson. It would have been interesting if he'd have been part of the Big Red Machine. How awesome that would have been. But they ultimately got, I think, when they traded Pappas in '68, I think that's when Clay Carroll came over. So they got a pretty reliable relief pitcher ultimately out of the deal. So but I think when you track trades, it's always kind of interesting. Like you said, Tim Leary became Hal Morris. So you can sort of look at it. I think about how Paul O'Neill kind of ultimately became
Deion Sanders.
Yeah, but then taking it down the road, they traded Sanders for Portugal and Burba, and then they traded Burba for Sean Casey. So we got, so it's fun to sort of run that string out and think about it, a little bit.
We ought to create like a family tree, Jack.
Yeah.
With all these sprouts off of these trades and where they eventually led.
Well, just thinking about it, and I think that trade, the Daniels trade, like you say, they got Mariano Duncan, who was pretty critical in the '90 team, and Hal Morris. I've been trying to think through on the podcast, like what trades have been good for the Reds, what trades have been bad for the Reds, and I feel like maybe I'm just sort of a Pollyanna about it, but I feel like the Reds have done a pretty decent job on trades. As I think back,
I don't know if you go look at some of the Jim Bowden clunkers, there have been some,
So what was
old leather pants?
John Wetland for Dave Martinez.
Okay, there you
go.
Yeah.
There, if you go and look, there's some major ones. Yeah. Willie Mo Pena for Aaron Boone for Willie Mo Pena.
That turned into Bronson Arroyo though. So
that's always been a little bit of a Pollyanna.
Yeah,
that's these are rose-colored glasses. You can't tell the rose color on these glasses. But, well, don't even. Yeah, I mean, we could get started on Bowden. I mean, I think a guy who's probably universally disliked around here, which he's got a mixed history. He's got he's a guy in Reds country with sort of an interesting legacy. But I got to meet Dan O'Dowd, who was the general manager of the Rockies.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his. Yeah.
And he worked in the Indians organization for a while, and through a mutual friend, we talked one time, and he told me he thought that Bowden kind of played fantasy baseball, and just in terms of some of his signings and that sort of thing, because there were some clunkers. I mean, besides trades, just some of the the misses on the draft picks and that sort of thing.
Well, also passing on Jeter for Chad Mottola, Yeah.
That's
a big one. That's a big.
Any other Reds tidbits from your book, or you want to tell us anything about your book?
Let's see. I think. Well, God bless his soul, Tim McCarver was not happy when I told him that Johnny Edwards believed that had he caught all 7 games of that series, they would have won. By the way, in my second interview, I should not have told Tim, oh, by the way, Johnny Edwards said something. And it colored the rest of that interview by far.
Really? Oh, that's funny. So Edwards, yeah, that's right. Edwards wound up with the Cardinals. Yeah.
Not only that, he was Gibson's personal catcher for most of that season. And in that, in the game where Gibson's own scoreless inning streak was broken, he was the one who allowed the wild pitch that was ruled what should have been ruled a pass ball. It was ruled a wild pitch that broke this scoreless inning streak. He was the catcher.
McCarver or Edwards?
Edwards.
Oh, Edwards. Okay. Yeah. Well, I think it was in your book, but McCarver would go out to talk to Gibson sometimes, and Gibson would wave him off and say, "The only thing you know about pitching is it's hard to hit."
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite lines.
Well, I'd say Bob Gibson was pretty hard to hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially that year. My God, Now, I would, for people who are listening to the podcast who've not read The Year of the Pitcher, I cannot recommend it enough. It just was just amazing guy. McLean and Gibson were just such interesting characters. And just 1968, I mean, just what a year. I mean, you have two assassinations. You've got the Chicago convention, which was a mess, and just the riots in the cities. And I know there's portions of your book, Sridhar, where you kind of talk about, I think, was it the Tigers? Were they on a team outing or something and could see the smoke coming from the
yeah,
city?
so that's from 67. So,
okay.
I mean, obviously the book isn't all in 68. It actually starts in 1934. But the Tigers of 68 are always linked to the Detroit riots of 67. Because it actually started, it was going on during doubleheader with the Yankees. And there are scenes that are quite famous, like Mickey Lolich having to, be in the National Guard, quite literally not literally, but having to go home and change into his guard outfit, and Willie Horton, the outfielder, being on the streets in his Tigers uniform. But then, kind of the next day, there was an outing in Grosse Pointe on this yacht club, and a bunch of those Tigers, they didn't know what to do, so they actually went and watched this kind of the city burn, from this boat, and that was a story that was never been told, and to get that kind of detail was pretty remarkable. Not to say that they were indifferent; they just didn't know what to do, and so. But yeah.
Well, it's interesting, looking and talking about the 68 story with Milt Pappas. I mean, I guess that was reported in the local papers, but for at that point I was 10 years old. It just went over my head. I mean, when I read that in your book, I was like, holy, I had no idea that was going on. And I wonder, I mean, I just don't know. Maybe you do, Sridhar, if the beat reporters were talking about it or if they just stayed away from it entirely.
I mean, it was pretty heavily reported by the local papers and the Sporting News, because it was a big deal. I mean, Milt was a pretty disliked guy by that point, because he and Nuxall had got into it, I think, over where you sit on a team flight. And the press was still kind of anti-union.
Sure.
But I think that episode and Milt's role in it had been sort of lost to history. And so that's why finding it and being able to talk to him before, he passed was really important to me. So.
You didn't talk to Bristol, did he? Did you?
No.
I remember Bristol getting thrown. This is funny. I was at a game in Crosley Field. So it was the last episode of The Fugitive, the TV show with whatever the guy's name was in it. I'm drawing a blank. But they were going to solve the it was the series finale, not just the season finale, but like, you know, they were going to figure out the one-armed man or whatever. And we went to the game that night. I went with my dad. It might have been with my not whole team, but Bristol got thrown out of the game early in the game. And I remember somebody saying, he just wants to watch The Fugitive. So I don't know. He was a pretty fiery guy. Hey, Shredder, have you seen the Reds play in other parks besides here in Cincinnati?
Like a lot. So,
Okay.
you know, I live here in New York, so I've seen them both at Old Chase Stadium, and, you know, I go and see them at Citi Field and Yankee Stadium. I've seen them at Fenway. I've seen them at RFK, which is interesting.
Wow.
In DC.
Nationals Park. Yeah.
For our younger audience, they won't know what RFK Stadium is.
Yeah. Let's see. Wrigley Field, of course. Whatever Comiskey Park is called now.
Do you have a favorite?
Camden Yards. Favorite park?
Yeah.
I think I like different parks for different reasons. I was just in Kansas City to talk at the Negro League Museum, and I like Kauffman Stadium because I think it's underrated because that style and that design of like the early 70s and like it's almost like I know it's aging and they're going to want to replace it, but it plays big, and I miss that style of playing big. And also it's just like a cool design. It's an underrated design, and they've just done a really good job with it.
Yeah.
And so I really like that. I think baseball, and there are lots of things about Great American Ballpark I really like. I think the Reds are in this regard, are a top-notch organization in terms of, you know, everything from ticket sales to how, like, everything top-notch about, you know, what goes on in the park and everything like that. For my money, it's too small. And I miss, with the new stadiums for the large park, except for maybe the ones out west and Citi Field here, I miss wide open National League Baseball, and Kansas City is probably the closest thing.
It's ironic. It's ironic since it's an American League park.
It's ironic, yeah, and you know they had to move it back because I mean it's still really hard to hit home runs there, and so I don't know what the new Kansas City park will be like. I spent a lot of time in the new Comiskey Park when I lived in Chicago, and so I have a strange fondness. And it was before they renovated it, so it was like super dumpy. But I have a fondness for that, and I like Citi Field here like a lot, again because it plays big,
Yeah,
and it allows for, you know, the kind of team the Reds have built, you know, to play like they do at their best, with speed and all that kinds of stuff. Yeah, I mean, different parks do different things, right?
how's your reception? How do people treat you? I mean, do you wear a Reds cap and Reds gear, or you know, have you been
Yeah,
treated well?
I've always been treated well. I
Okay.
mean, yeah, I've never gotten flack. I mean, one of the things too is like if you keep score, no one will ever bother you because like because you know it just shows that you know more than they do.
That's great. That's great. It's like pulling out a book on an airplane. You know,
Yep.
people pull out a book, and you know nobody will talk to you. You know, it's great. That's right. Kansas City, I've been, and I agree with you, Stritter. I think it's a really cool park. The fountain is great, and it was interesting. You know, they kind of went against the grain because those parks, both their football and Kauffman, were built right around the time when everybody was doing the multi-purpose thing, and
Yeah.
they didn't do it. The only thing I don't like about, I mean, the thing I don't like about Kauffman is it's just not downtown. And
No.
Kansas City is interesting. It's got a downtown, and then it's got an area called the Plaza area.
Yeah.
And
That's where we stayed. Yeah.
then 10 miles down the road, you know, down the interstate, you've got Kauffman. I mean,
I mean,
I
I mean, that's why they want to go downtown because it is so far, and
yeah.
so I understand why they want to go. So
yeah. No, I like being able to walk right from downtown to the park. So
I mean, that's why Great American's great. So
yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. I wanted to mention, and we're running up on time a little bit, but the people should know, our listeners should know that Sridhar is an absolute stud, capital S, on the Immaculate Grid game, which is, of course, the game that it comes out every day, and you get 9 squares, and you try to find players who played for the matching team. So you might have the Reds down the left side and across the top, the Boston Red Sox or whomever. And so you've got to find somebody who played for the Reds and the Red Sox, maybe somebody who played for the Reds and the Blue Jays, et cetera. And you get a score called the rarity score, and the lower the number, the better. And Sridhar, I know you've hit 3. Have you hit 2 yet?
I've hit 2 a bunch. I haven't hit 1. My really good friend from college has hit 1 twice, 2 days in a row last week or this week.
That's amazing. So who are some of your? So when I play it, and I'm not nearly as good. To say I'm not as good as Sridhar is to say, I also don't hit like Joey Votto. I mean, it's absurd to even put us in the same sentence. But I will start off with Reds. So like if I see a combination, even if it's the Pirates and the Blue Jays, it's like, okay, so let me think about some Reds and start there, and then try to see, well, did they also play for the Pirates? So who are some of your go-to Reds players when you play the Immaculate Grid, when you're looking for obscure Reds players? I don't want you to give away all your secrets, but
Roberto Pentagini. And also you could use Luis Quinones, but not as a Red. You can use him as an A. Like the key to the grid is to use the player's base, but not with the team they're known as. Right. So think of like someone like Sam Horn, but not as a Red Sox. Think of him as a Ranger. So like Luis Quinones, I've never used him as a Red. I've used him, just think of him as an Oakland A. And that's the key to the grid.
Right.
Like I used Luis Quinones the other day, and it was like a .006. It was that was the day I got a 2. Or like him, I love using Herm Winningham as an Expo / Red Sox player. Another one of my favorite Reds.
Yeah.
Luis Quinones is probably my second favorite Red behind Eric Davis.
Really?
Jack, I want to challenge our audience to email us if they ever get anywhere close to 2. I think the last time I played the Immaculate Grid, I got like a 400.
Yeah, it's not easy. Now that's an interesting, and again, we are running out of time, and I don't want to inconvenience you too much, Sridhar, but that to me, that is an interesting list of Reds players. Eric Davis, Luis Quinones. that may be the unique list of favorite Reds players. In our listening audience, I think. But
I think Herm is kind of in there.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well, that 90 team with Quinones. I mean, Quinones got a lot of key hits, and I think.
I mean, he did hit the game-winning hit to win the pennant.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, that's right. Well, and then Winningham had that bunt that he beat out in the World Series. And, so lots of good things to talk about. Well, listen, we really appreciate your time today, Sridhar. This was a lot of fun. You are a true Reds fan, and we thank you for gracing us with your presence. Do we have a round of applause, Randy? For
probably.
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate our listeners, and we certainly appreciate our guests. So thanks, Sridhar.
Thanks, Sridhar.
All right. That's it.
The key to
hopefully